some very disturbing things are happening in the world around us. Let's take a look at 7 stories that have been going viral and comment on them from a Christian perspective. The last one is absolutely shocking. And number 7 is Demi Lovato, and probably the most evil song ever written, called Swine, which openly promotes the ending of preborn life.
Well, now she has a surprise new single. It is titled Swine, and it was made specifically to promote You gotta promote She said, I created Swine to amplify the voices of those who advocate for choice and bodily autonomy.
It's pretty shocking that such evil behavior would be so unashamedly endorsed in a song like this. Demi Lovato is basically saying that if she is not allowed to end the life of her preborn child, then people are treating her like a pig, like a dirty animal.
And of course, she's standing on a she's gonna be burned at the stake. So basically, she's saying she's swine. Just to get this argument straight, she's swine unless you allow her to be absolutely promiscuous and kill the baby that is produced. Right, so what makes her human is actually the thing that makes her most animal.
But it's not just Demi Lovato who is communicating horrific things about this evil practice. For example, both Stacy Abrams and Gavin Newsom have communicated atrocious things about this practice as well. It is now normal for countless people to not only support, but celebrate one of the worst sins in the world.
How many of you, when that came on, thought about Stacy Abrams, right? Running for governor of Georgia, who's arguing that that's manufactured in order to deceive women. She's running for governor of Georgia. And she argued that what we heard just now is something that's been manufactured in order to deceive women. I mean, that's how far people will go. That's how deeply ingrained this is. For Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who's basically put his flag in the ground and said, listen, California's gonna be an abortion destination state. We'll help you get here.
And number 6 is Starbucks reportedly telling store owners to not put out pride decorations in their stores, which has resulted in much outrage from progressives.
But they have a new thing that they are very upset about because Starbucks has allegedly banned pride decorations from its stores halfway through Pride Month. Drama ensuing, tears, crying, outrage. TikToks have been posted.
Here is one sample TikTok about what Starbucks is doing, as well as some of the comments from critics of what Starbucks is doing.
Oh my God, they're coming down. The drama. The caption says, how is Starbucks, a so-called pro-LGBTQ plus company, celebrating Pride Month this year? By taking down pride flags across the US. And then they wrote a whole long caption, and the comments were just as dramatic. Somebody else said, the Starbucks around me has nothing, not even merch to buy. Somebody else said, I still don't know why they're not up at my local store. Every year in the past, they have been absolutely in your face with flags. Now, nothing.
The behavior of Starbucks is incredibly shocking, because Starbucks is considered to be on the front lines of supporting everything that people on the left celebrate. And Starbucks is just one out of many corporations that seem to be changing regarding their public support for behavior that much of the country does not want to be bombarded with constantly. And number 5 is Google doing something pretty shocking in disassociating itself from drag events. Google is a very progressive and left-leaning organization. So it is surprising that even Google is caving to the pressure to remain at least somewhat neutral in the culture wars.
I've got an interesting story out of Google. Google, looking at what has happened with Bud Light, with Target, with Starbucks, many other companies, looks like they have decided to cancel Pride. That's right. I mean, you heard me. Google now dropping sponsorships of various Pride and drag shows after hundreds of workers signed petitions calling it a direct affront to their religious beliefs and sensitivities of Christians. Hey, you know, I feel like I've always had a pretty sensible take on this, if I do say so myself, but This is wild. I've never seen the left cede so much ground before in my life, and we're seeing it all happen in a single month in June, of which there's only a few days left, thank goodness.
It really does seem like something big is happening in the culture. Whereas in the past, pretty much every corporation would proudly support behavior that is contradictory to the Christian worldview, it now seems that there is enough backlash from conservatives and Christians against this that many corporations are now thinking twice before doing things that might offend half the country. And number 4 is the Supreme Court ruling against affirmative action at Harvard and South Carolina. Critics of the decision say that this ruling is a step backwards regarding social justice and that particular groups deserve to be treated in a special manner because of injustices in the past. Barack and Michelle Obama are two very high-profile people who are speaking out against this decision.
Well, folks, Barack and Michelle Obama both got into college through affirmative action, undoubtedly, and both of them are very upset that the Supreme Court just decided that you can no longer use race for admissions when it comes to college. Barack and Michelle Obama are sounding off on this. Then Barack Obama put out like a 2-sentence statement, quote, "Like any policy, affirmative action wasn't perfect, but it allowed generations of students like Michelle and me to prove we belonged. Now it's up to all of us to give young people the opportunities they deserve and help students everywhere benefit from new perspectives." Well, wow, that's it. You could prove, you know what's one way to prove you belong at a school? By scoring appropriately to get into that school. It's an amazing way to prove you belong.
Of course, I'm not against doing things to help particular groups of people who may have particular disadvantages. However, when this help comes at the expense of other groups of people who have worked equally hard, if not harder, to achieve a particular goal, then there is something very wrong with this system. The goal of social justice is not to ensure that everyone is treated equally, but rather to try to elevate particular groups above other groups, which is not really justice at all, but rather results in bias against particular groups of people.
Social justice is not about individuals, it's about groups. It's another very important distinction. It's not about individuals, it's about groups.
And number 3 is the Supreme Court ruling in favor of a Christian web designer who felt that it was against her conscience to design a website that promoted a same-sex relationship. Some are saying that her behavior is a violation of the Civil Rights Act.
This morning, the Supreme Court handed down a major decision rooted in First Amendment rights, but opponents say it violates the Civil Rights Act. 6 justices ruled that certain businesses can refuse to serve gay people. In this case, they sided with a Christian website designer in Colorado who doesn't want to create websites for same-sex weddings due to religious objections.
However, it seems obvious that no person should be forced to do something that the person believes is immoral. There are plenty of web designers in the country, so there is absolutely no reason to demand one particular web designer to violate her conscience in what she designs. One commenter on the video we just played made an excellent point. He writes, "I'm gay and I support a business and their right to serve whoever they want, especially when the service inherently involves promoting something you don't agree with. Also, people keep saying this allows people to discriminate against gay people. It isn't gay people. If a gay person asked for a heterosexual site, it wouldn't have been rejected. So it isn't the person making the request, it's the request itself. Similar to how a tattoo artist can decide to not tattoo a swastika, a web designer can choose to not serve someone they don't agree with the morality of. This person is exactly right. The court's decision is not about excluding a particular group of people, but rather it's simply about not forcing people to do something they believe is immoral." Another commenter brought up another good point about the hypothetical that Justice Neil Gorsuch brought up. This commentator writes, "The Constitution controls the Civil Rights Act, not the other way around." Notice how she didn't answer the question regarding the example of a gay web designer being forced to create a website for an anti-gay organization. She just decided to ignore it and make her own prepackaged statement. It seems pretty obvious that the people who are opposed to this Supreme Court decision would be very against forcing a gay web designer to design a website for an anti-gay organization. So it seems hypocritical that they would want to force a Christian web designer to design a website for something she believes is immoral. The reality is that not all love is good, and there are some kinds of love that Christians simply cannot endorse, support, or celebrate.
Remember, I told you this is an important word for our day. Love can be sinful. We live in the midst of a culture that needs to hear that. It needs to hear that from us, because it's coming at us with this whole love is love mentality. And how can you be against love? Nobody can be against love. Certainly Christians can't be against love, because God is love and we are called to love. Therefore, how can you stand in the way of any two people who love one another? But our text today makes it very clear that there are instances when love can be sinful.
And number 2 is Steven Crowder's seeming dishonesty regarding the divorce he is currently undergoing, in response to video footage from Ring that showed him behaving in an atrocious manner towards his wife. Steven promised that he had evidence that would vindicate him.
So today, I have filed a motion to officially unseal all files as they relate to the matter of legal record. Finances, relevant medical records, including mental health history or evaluations, depositions, and any motions or sanctions from the courts of Texas. I will not be leaking private marital information to the press. But if the privacy agreements are not respected by all parties, I will address all that is a matter of irrefutable legal record in full context next week.
I actually waited to hear what Steven had to say, because I certainly want to hear both sides of the story, because at that moment, what we knew about his behavior seemed pretty inexcusable. However, next week, nothing happened. Steven did not provide the information he had promised to provide.
He never did that, because he just says stuff and it's not true and nobody fact checks him, and a lot of his followers just simply believe everything he says.
Not only did Steven not provide any information that would vindicate his behavior, it also seems that Steven is trying to shut down efforts to make the details of the divorce public, while his wife wants to make sure people know the details of what is going on.
Well, it also turns out that he lied in the effort to release all the documents, and when he showed up for court, he tried to get everything locked down. In fact, it is his wife, it turns out, that is fighting for more exposure. It is his wife that is fighting for more sunlight, which is, in fact, the best disinfectant. According to the New York Post, Hillary testified that her soon-to-be ex-husband has rage issues and punches holes in the wall, while Crowder asked for full custody of his children, claiming that Hillary exhibited erratic behavior.
Steven accuses his wife of erratic behavior, but the specific example he describes simply does not seem erratic to me at all. And if this is the worst information that Steven has about his wife, it's seeming less and less likely to me that Steven will be able to convince me that his wife is the person in the wrong in this situation.
Well, then he gave an example of her erratic behavior. As an example of her erratic behavior, he alleged that Hillary had not informed him that their home address had been posted on Twitter for several months. His attorney noted that she has no public social media presence. So her erratic behavior is the fact that she didn't inform him that there was a tweet that she did not author that was on the web that had their home address on it. That sounds like a really erratic, crazy woman.
This situation with Steven Crowder and his wife is extremely sad, because it's always extremely sad when marriages fall apart. I'm sure that there is likely fault on both sides, but the solution to conflict within a marriage should be selfless love from both sides, not attacking the other person or seeking a divorce.
Here's the definition. Biblical love is an act of the will accompanied by emotion that leads to action on behalf of its object. Let me give it to you again. Biblical love is an act of the will. It is first and foremost a choice. We do choose. It is an act of the will. It is accompanied by emotion, which means it's not void of emotion, but it's also not led by emotion. And it leads to action on behalf of its object.
And number 1 is Logan Paul pretending to apologize and make things right regarding one of his scams, but then not following through on what he said he would do.
6 months ago, I investigated CryptoZoo, a scam created by Logan Paul and a team of criminals, and a dude named Jeff, which ultimately resulted in millions of dollars being stolen from fans. I was threatened with a lawsuit for exposing it, but ultimately, Logan Paul decided to thank me instead for his public undressing and announced a $1.8 million refund to the victims. Now, I thought that was a great ending to the story.
So Logan Paul was basically able to save his image by promising to provide refunds and to make things right with the victims who lost money investing in his project. However, the problem was that either Logan lied or he isn't prioritizing this effort to the extent that it's simply not happening at all.
And I got no response. In fact, the only response I got came on my 4th attempt to reach Logan, but this one came from his criminal defense lawyers, a guy named Jeffrey Neiman. So I opened up the letter and it read, "We represent Logan Paul. Mr. Paul has informed us of your outreach about the status of the CryptoZoo buybacks. Mr. Paul remains committed to this process. We are working with Mr. Paul to evaluate the best way to achieve this goal. In the meantime, please direct to our attention any further inquiries to Mr. Paul. Thank you for your patience and understanding."
It seems pretty obvious that Logan Paul responding through a lawyer with something as vague as "We are working with Mr. Paul to evaluate the best way to achieve this goal" is incredibly suspicious, especially because it's been numerous months already since Logan promised to provide the refunds. The most reasonable interpretation is that Logan Paul is trying to avoid providing the refunds altogether.
But he had promised $1.8 million at least in refunds to these victims. And it's been 6 months, and he hasn't done any of what he promised. He hasn't given anyone any of their money back. It's been complete radio silence with people begging for updates on when the refunds are coming.
Logan Paul's dishonesty and silence is extremely troubling, both because there are many victims whom Logan has scammed out of thousands of dollars, and because Logan is in serious sin that must be repented of. Logan's tendency to hide the truth at the expense of others is immoral behavior that will be judged by God, either in this life or the life to come.
Lying is the way you hide what's wrong with you and avoid consequences. Anger is the way you reach out and assault the people who threaten your freedom. Psychologists say that by the time children are 4, they have mastered the art of lying. Doesn't take long. And the first sin specifically mentioned is lying. Because again, it is the default position of fallenness. It's where sinners go most naturally. Why? For self-preservation and to do harm and damage out of anger and hatred.
In the midst of all this evil in the world around us, let us as Christians continue to have hope, because we know that God is in control and has already won the victory.
You've already read that Jesus is the ruler of the kings of the earth. Amen? That means there is no human authority that stands over and above his authority. He is the ruler of the kings of the earth. That means that there is no human authority that is going to thwart what it is that Christ has done and is doing. Fret not, saints. It's one thing to be active in our community. It's one thing to be active in our culture. It's one thing to be active in politics. It's another thing for us to sit around in the corner afraid because some decision came down or some man got elected that we think is going to thwart the plan of the ruler of the kings of the earth. Help you if you're scared of that. Folks, God is not running for God. Christ is the ruler of the kings of the earth.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a deacon, a husband, a father, a software engineer, and an amateur maker of videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help me in my mission to spread biblical truth, just subscribe and watch these videos until the end, which will help the YouTube algorithm recommend these videos to more people. I'm committed to using the skills and gifts God has given me to glorify Him and communicate biblical truth, and I would be so grateful if you would come be a part of what I'm building. You can visit my website at joyfulexile.com to learn more about me and what I'm working on. I hope you're having a blessed day. I will see you in the next video, and remember, this world is not our home.